So this weekend is the IndyCar season opener at the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. Of course, I'll be in person, but right now I'm in my office, and I just wanted to go through each of the 27, yes, 27 full-time entries in IndyCar. A very strong, very healthy entry for the 2023 season, and give my thoughts on each of the teams and drivers going in to this IndyCar season. Should be a fun ride. Let's get into it. So let's start out with the team that won the championship last year, Team Penske. And of course, we'll start with the driver who won the championship for them, Will Power. Now, Will has declined to use the number 1 this year. He'll continue to be the number 12 Verizon Chevrolet for the entire year, which is good to see. Verizon re-up their support in the offseason, and really good idea because Will Power, I think, is driving as well as he ever has in his entire career. I think last season was just a fantastic performance by Will Power, start to finish, despite the fact that he only won one race on the streets of Belle Isle the last time they'll race there. That race, of course, moves to the downtown city streets for 2023. But I think we're going to expect more of the same, quite frankly. I'm excited to see how far he can stretch the pole position record. He's pretty good at St. Pete, especially in qualifying, so he could be coming out of the gate really hot and on his way for a title defense. Joseph Newgarden, well, you got to think he's due, right? I mean, it seems like he wins a championship once every couple of years. The last couple of years for Joseph have been defined by the first race of the season, ironically enough. He didn't have a great finish last year at St. Petersburg, and the previous year he was involved in a crash at lap 1 at Barber, and that really set him back. So I think the key for Joseph Newgarden, ironically enough, for his championship is just going to be getting out of St. Pete with a good result. And if he does that, he clearly has the consistency. He's darn near unbeatable at Iowa unless the car fails on him. So there's almost 2 guaranteed wins for Joseph Newgarden if no acts of God happen right out of the gate. And, of course, he's just strong everywhere, except for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval for some reason. That's always been a curious sticking point for Joseph Newgarden, that he hasn't performed in the sport's biggest race to the expectations, I think, of many. But we'll see if he changes that this year. It would be ironic, especially since Indy is not double points this year, if Joseph wins the 500 and can't convert that into a championship, even if he does end up doing that. Scott McLaughlin was one of the breakouts of last year. I think everybody expected that Scott would be a race winner eventually in IndyCar. He came right out of the box in his second season at St. Petersburg, winning the race, ended up winning a couple more races throughout the year. I think Scott is going to be a championship contender. There's no doubt about it. I don't expect he's going to have a third-year slump. I think he's going to be right there and challenging Joseph and Will. Chip Ganassi Racing is a very interesting team. They were the center of controversy at the end of, or the mid part to the end of last year. One person who's never controversial is Scott Dixon. And, he just continues on chugging. He's the Energizer Bunny. He gets 1 or 2 wins a year, oftentimes is in mathematical contention for the championship at the end of the year, and usually wins it. So I wouldn't count out Scott Dixon. If you count out Scott Dixon, typically he proves you wrong. Another driver who, if you underestimate or count out, that proves you wrong, as I found out last year with the Indy 500, is Marcus Ericsson. Ericsson is actually my pick to win the championship this year. He's steadily progressed as a driver in this series, and I think he's going to finally make that final step of progression, and I think he's going to win the championship this year. We're going to have to see, but I think he's primed to kind of step into a leading role at Chip Ganassi Racing, especially with with Alex Palou leaving at the end of the year. Real quick, I want to talk about the 11 car. This is the former Jimmy car. It's going to be split once again. Not a single driver will be contesting the entire championship. There will be 2. Marcus Armstrong is a rookie from the Formula One feeder series ranks, and he's highly touted. He's from New Zealand, and just everybody who's talked about him thinks that he's going to be quick, and I agree. I saw his preseason testing times. They were right up there with the fastest drivers in this sport. I'm actually going to throw this out there too. I think he's going to win the rookie title. And that's without running on the ovals. And you may say, David, you're absolutely nuts. Why would you do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Romain Grosjean almost won the rookie title over Scott McLaughlin in a Penske car 2 years ago, and that was with Romain missing a double points race at the Indy 500. No more double points in 2023. And if Armstrong is as strong as he looks to be in that Ganassi car, wins a couple of races, or at least is consistently in the top 10, I just think versus the other rookies over the course of the season, the points are going to accumulate in such a way that I think Armstrong will probably prevail as the top rookie. Now, Takuma Sato will be driving the car on the oval tracks, and that's a very interesting standpoint from a lot of ways, because I think the fact that he and Scott Dixon don't really get along, and they've clashed many times on the racetrack. The fact that they're going to do battle at Texas, where they have literally crashed racing for the win before, I think it's going to be very interesting. And of course, we know how fast the Chip Ganassi cars are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and Takuma Sato is just as fast and just as capable as those cars are from Chip Ganassi Racing. So I think Takuma Sato is going to be an early pick to win the Indy 500, as he has been essentially since he almost lost the 500, or did lose the 500 in 2012. And then there's the curious case of Alex Palou. A bit of a lame duck year at Chip Ganassi Racing. I'm very curious, despite the fact that he won in dominant fashion in the season finale for Chip Ganassi Racing at Laguna Seca, just how much preferential treatment, or maybe if he won't get preferential treatment at all at Ganassi, in a lame duck year where contractually he's stuck at Ganassi, but really his heart and probably his mind is with McLaren. He's got test driving duties in Formula One this year for McLaren, so I'm curious to see how the Alex Palou saga continues through this year with Chip Ganassi Racing, and then on to next year with McLaren in some capacity, whether that's Aero McLaren SP or the Formula One team. We don't quite know yet. And speaking of McLaren, 3 cars this year. The 2 you remember from last year, of course, are Pato O'Ward, who I think at some point is going to be a championship contender. Now, no team outside of Penske or Ganassi has won the championship since 2012, but if there's any driver or team combination that can do it, I think it's the 5 Aero McLaren SP car driven by Pato O'Ward. But with many young drivers in the series, the same criticism, I guess you could say, of Pato is he's got to get more consistent. If Pato consistently wins races, gets top 10s, he's going to be there in contention for the championship. I have no doubt about that. Felix Rosenqvist is another curious case. We thought he might not even come back to IndyCar this year with all the Alex Palou drama, but he's here. He was the only driver to finish in the top 10 in points that did not win a race last year. I think he came on very strongly at the end of last year's IndyCar season, and I think that first win is not very far away for Felix Rosenqvist. That team is first win with McLaren, I should say. I think that win is coming with McLaren. I think it's just honestly luck. I mean, I think he could have won Mid-Ohio very easily last year. Their qualifying got extremely good towards the end of the year. The strategy is always exciting with the 6 team, and it's the same team as last year. They just changed the numbers. The driver who will be driving under the number 7 banner this year is Alexander Rossi, who moves over from the Andretti Autosport team. Interesting case here. A lot of people, including Rossi himself, thought maybe Andretti was holding him back a little bit. So I'm very curious to see if Andretti Autosport was really the problem, or was it Alexander Rossi? I guess the time will tell. St. Pete is one of the tracks that Rossi has won at before. So I think we're going to get a good litmus test right out of the gate. And speaking of Andretti Autosport, to say that their 2022 was dysfunctional would be a bit of an understatement. But now that Rossi is out of the picture, I think they're looking to settle things down a little bit. Colton Herta, his goal is to win the championship, as it is every year. But kind of like with Pato, in fact, I would say more than Pato, the big thing with Herta is going to be consistency. We talk about it every year. He goes out there and absolutely smashes everybody race to race, but then he has a silly incident, or something out of his control takes him out of races. You got to get consistent if you want to win a championship, and if you want those super license points to go to Formula One. And make no mistake, that's it's no secret. That's what Colton Herta wants to do. He wants to get those super license points, and the way to do that is to win the championship. Now, someone who may challenge him for that is coming from his very own team, and that's Kyle Kirkwood, who moves over from the A.J. Foyt team after a year away from Andretti Autosport. Of course, he was very good with them in Indy Lights. Kirkwood's been fast in testing, and we'll see if that form carries through to the season, but I think it will. I think last year was an anomaly with Kyle Kirkwood. He was driving equipment that he has not experienced in his career. Oftentimes he is in the best equipment, and he was not in the best equipment last year. He's back in much more competitive equipment this year, and I think we're going to see the performance level come back up. Romain Grosjean perhaps was the most disappointing driver of all last year. In fact, some people even have questioned whether or not he should have moved on from Coyne at all. But he was fast in St. Pete early on last year. A lot of people forget that. It's just kind of weird how it just never seemed to work out for Romain Grosjean. Will he get a win this year? That's the question that I have, and I'm honestly not sure what the answer to that question is. I'm actually leaning towards no, which is kind of surprising, but there's so many competitive cars this year and so many competitive drivers that's going to take an absolutely spectacular and special effort. And can Grosjean deliver on that? Now, I think podiums for sure. A win, we'll have to see. And Devlin DeFrancesco, not really sure what his future holds past this year with Andretti Autosport, but there's no better thing than having good performances, I would say. And, it's hard to judge a guy off of one rookie year. It'll be interesting to see whether he slumps in his sophomore year or whether he has a market improvement. If he starts being as competitive as his other teammates in Andretti Autosport, I think we're going to be talking about potentially Devlin DeFrancesco staying in the IndyCar series beyond this year. Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing. Graham Rahal. The tail of the tape with Graham Rahal really is, it seems like once every 10 years or so, Graham Rahal pops off. It's interesting, like the 2015 season, he was competing for a championship, then kind of fell off the face of the earth for a while, won a couple of races at Detroit, has fallen off the face of the earth again. But, Graham's always got the potential to go out there and start racing for wins and competing for championships. The question is going to be his team. They made a lot of engineering changes in the offseason, and I think that's really going to be dependent on whether Graham is fast or Graham is mid-pack. Christian Lundgaard, I think, overcame a lot of adversity last year, and the fact that he looked like a race winner at times in equipment that his teammates really weren't having much success in at all says to me if Rahal even improves in the slightest bit, I think Christian Lundgaard is going to be one of our first-time winners this year in IndyCar. He's also switched to the Hy-Vee car this year. I think really they just stripped the numbers off Jack Harvey's car and put them on Christian Lundgaard's car. I don't think there's too much difference there, but that's an interesting one as well. I think, you give the big sponsor to the driver who's performing the best, and that was Christian Lundgaard last year. And Jack Harvey, this is definitely a career year for him. It's I'm not speaking out of school. He had a tough year last year. And so for Jack Harvey, it's going to be proving that you belong. And I think he's capable of doing that. He would not be in the series this long if people didn't think he's got the driving talent. But the question is going to be, can he deliver the results? I think that's going to be a very interesting story to watch throughout this year. Meyer Shank Racing is another one that could change by the end of the season about who we know is going to be driving there. Helio Castroneves has made no bones about it. He's also in a career year. He's got to perform. I think he said specifically if he does well at the Indy 500, then he's not too worried about his seat. But the looming shadow of IMSA driver Tom Blomqvist has been lingering over that team because Honda likes him a lot. And they want a driver who can perform in Indy cars, and Blomqvist looks like a generational talent. So Helio, he's got to do well at the 500 at least. Simon Pagenaud, interestingly enough, Michael Shank said a lot of very positive things about him at the Rolex, and Simon brought it at the Rolex. He was extremely quick. He looked like he kind of did in his championship-winning years at Penske, and even Michael Shank said, hey, that's the best I've seen him drive personally. So I think Simon is feeling pretty confident going into this year. Meyer Shank's made some changes. I believe they've hired a pit stop coach, and that was really their weakness in a lot of ways. Qualifying and pit stops were kind of what kept, especially Simon Pagenaud, out of victory lane last year. So I would expect there's going to be a performance step up at Meyer Shank, and expect particularly from that number 60 car. Ed Carpenter Racing. This is a team that was on the struggle bus last year a little bit. I know both Connor and Renus mentioned to me that they were looking forward to the offseason when they could get some testing in and kind of start rebuilding the setup again. So, I mean, they're kind of an unknown, I think. Renus had some great drives last year. Connor's always fast at the Indy 500. Can they be consistent? That's going to be the question, I think, with Ed Carpenter Racing. Juncos Hollinger, I think, is the dark horse in a lot of ways. Callum Ilott, I think, figured it out last year. He was on the front row at the last race at Laguna Seca. He had pace and testing. I think Callum is going to be, I don't know if he's going to be able to win in that equipment, but man, he's going to give it hell. I think he's going to be running up front. I think he's going to be challenging the leaders, and I think he could surprise given the right situation. And that car, or that team, is a two-car operation now with Agustin Canapino from Argentinian Touring Car Racing. A lot of people describe him as the Scott McLaughlin of Argentina, and I'm very curious to get to know him a little bit over the course of the season. Apparently, he took a crash course in English. He's very committed to IndyCar racing, and he was not like off the pace at all in testing. I mean, yeah, Callum was at the front, but what can you expect from a guy in his first real shot at an IndyCar? I think Agustin Canapino is going to be a rookie to watch because, frankly, he's just a complete unknown here in the U.S. I mean, people from Argentina are probably going to scream at me in the comments about how good he is, but I think he's a wild card. We really have no idea what to expect from him. Dale Coyne Racing. David Malukas was one of the great standout drivers of last year, and I think he's going to continue that trend this year. I think there's been some investment made in that team, particularly on the HMD side. I think that they think that it's a win-now mentality for David Malukas, and I think he may do it. Stingray Robb joins the team from the Indy Lights ranks. He won the final Indy Lights race of the season at Laguna Seca and moves up to Dale Coyne Racing. Again, a bit of an unknown in terms of what we're really expecting from Stingray in Indy cars. I would expect that he's probably going to develop throughout the season. Don't expect too much early on, but I think in the later part of the season, it seems like Dale Coyne always gets the best out of first-year drivers. And then finally, AJ Foyt Racing. A lot of changes here. Santino Ferrucci will be the team leader this time around, and they've went out and hired Michael Cannon away from Ganassi. Now, Michael and Santino worked together in their days at Dale Coyne when Santino really arrived on the scene in IndyCar. I think that this is another combination that may surprise some people. It's really going to depend if they can nail the setups or they can get some of the magic out of the car that Michael was able to do at Coyne and Ganassi. But I think there's some potential there with Santino Ferrucci at Foyt. And Benjamin Peterson for AJ Foyt Racing, moving up from Indy Lights as well. He's another unknown. I mean, he's been spending a ton of time with the AJ Foyt team. I think all the way back to last year, he was hanging out in that pit. They've kind of been grooming him over the course of last season. So again, I think he's a guy who could surprise because he spent so much time with that team, bonding with them, and we'll have to see. Foyt's a family operation, and I think they're treating Benjamin Peterson like family. We'll see if it pays off. But I'm looking forward to getting on the plane and heading to St. Pete. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.